Aksum. This is going to be an East Africa trading empire located right here, very close to the Red Sea in the Middle East. Great spot to run some trade. The kingdom of Aksum was a trading nation in the area of northern Ethiopia and Eritrea that existed from approximately 100 to 940 AD. Good long time. It grew from the Proto-Aksumite Iron Age period around the 4th century BC to achieve prominence in the 1st century AD, and was a major agent in the commercial route between the Roman Empire and ancient India. The Aksumite rulers facilitated trade by minting their own Aksumite currency. The state established its hegemony over the declining kingdom of Kush in Egypt and regularly entered the politics of the kingdom on the Arabian Peninsula, eventually extending its rule over the region with the conquest of the Himyarite kingdom. The Persian prophet Mani regarded Aksum as the third of the four greatest powers of his time, which include Rome, Persia, China, and Aksum. Origins. Aksum was previously thought to have been founded by Sabaeans, an ancient people speaking an old South Arabian language, who lived in what is today Yemen, in the southwest of the Arabian Peninsula. That's right around here. Yemen. That's where they think they came from. However, most scholars agree that prior to the arrival of Sabaeans, an African settlement by the Agawa people and other Ethiopian groups had already existed in the territory. Sabaean influence is now thought to have been minor, limited to a few localities and disappearing after a few decades or a century, which perhaps representing a trading or military colony. The Aksumite Empire at its height extended across most of present-day Eritrea, northern Ethiopia, western Yemen, southern Arabia, and Sudan. The capital city of the empire was Aksum, now in northern Ethiopia. Today, a smaller community, the city of Aksum was once a bustling metropolis and cultural and economic center. By the reign of Endubis in the 3rd century, the empire had begun minting its own currency. It converted to Christianity in 325 AD under King Ezana, and was the first state ever to use the image of the cross on its coins. The kingdom used the name Ethiopia as early as the 4th century. By 350 AD, Aksum conquered the kingdom of Kush. Around 520, King Caleb sent an expedition to Yemen against the Jewish Hamarite king Nuwas, who was persecuting the Christian Aksumite community in his kingdom. After several years of military and political struggles, Yemen fell under the rule of Aksumite general Abreha, who continued to promote the Christian faith until his death, not long after which Yemen was conquered by the Persians. According to Monroe Hay, these wars may have been Aksum's swan song as a great power, with an overall weakening of Aksumite authority and over-expenditure in money and manpower. It is also possible that Ethiopia was affected by the plague of Justinian around this time, a disease thought to be the first recorded instance of bubonic plague. This picture shows you the extent of the Silk Road. It was very economically important. Northern Silk Road and Southern Spice trade routes. The sea routes around the Horn of Arabia, right here, and the Indian subcontinent, located here, were Aksum's specialty for nearly 1,000 years. Notice how they have to go through Ethiopia, or the Aksum area, in order to make it. Covering parts of what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, Aksum was deeply involved in the trade network between India and the Mediterranean, where Rome and Byzantium would get their ivory, tortoise shells, gold, emeralds, and silk and spices. Aksum's access to both the Red Sea, right here, and Upper Nile, right here, allowed its strong navy to profit in trade between various African, Arabian, and Indian states. The empire traded with Roman traders as well as Egyptian and Persian merchants. The main exports of Aksum were agricultural products. The land was fertile during the time of the Aksumites, and the principal crops were grains such as wheat and barley. The people of Aksum also raised cattle, sheep, and camels. Wild animals were hunted for ivory and rhinoceros horn. The empire was rich with gold and iron deposits, and salt was an abundant and widely traded mineral. Aksum benefited from a major transformation of the maritime trading system that linked the Roman Empire and India. Starting around 100 BC, a route from Egypt to India was established. Making use of the Red Sea and using monsoon winds to cross the Arabian Sea directly to southern India. Aksum was ideally located to take advantage of the new trading state situation. Adulis soon became the main port for the export of African goods, such as ivory, incense, gold, and exotic animals. Slaves were also traded along the same routes. During the second and third centuries, the kingdom of Aksum continued to expand their control of the southern Red Sea. A caravan route to Egypt, which bypassed the Nile corridor entirely, was established. Aksum succeeded in becoming the principal supplier of African goods to the Roman Empire. You can see the Aksumite coins here. The Aksumite Empire is notable for a number of achievements, such as its own alphabet, the Ge'ez alphabet, which was eventually modified to include vowels. Furthermore, in the early times of the empire, giant obelisks, here's a picture of one, so these giant obelisks marked emperors' and nobles' tombs, which were underground. And the most famous is the obelisk of Aksum that you see here. Under Emperor Ezana, Aksum adopted Christianity in place of its former polytheistic and Judaic religions. This gave rise to the present day Ethiopian Orthodox Church and Eritrean Orthodox Church. Since the schism with Orthodoxy following the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD, it has been an important Miaphysite church, and its scriptures and liturgy continue to be in Ge'ez, the native language. The decline. Eventually, the Islamic Empire took control of the Red Sea and most of the Nile, forcing Aksum into economic isolation. Northwest of Aksum, modern day Sudan, the Christian states lasted until the 13th century before becoming Islamic. Aksum, isolated, nonetheless still remained Christian. After a second golden age in the early 6th century, the empire began to decline, eventually ceasing its production of coins in the early 7th century. Around the same time, the Aksumite population was forced to go farther inland to the highlands for protection, abandoning Aksum as the capital. Arab writers of the time continued to describe Ethiopia, no longer referred to as Aksum, as an extensive and powerful state, although it had lost control of most of the coast and its tributaries. While land was lost in the north, it was gained in the south, and Ethiopia still attracted Arab merchants. The capital was moved to a new location, currently unknown, though it may have been called Kubar or Jarmi. There exist different hypotheses as to why the empire collapsed, but historians agree that climate changes must have greatly contributed to the end of Aksum. As international profits from the exchange network declined, Aksum lost its ability to control its own raw material source, and that network collapsed. The already persistent environmental pressure of a large population to maintain a high level of regional food production had to be even more intensified. The result was a wave of soil erosion that began on a local scale around 650 AD and attained catastrophic proportions by 700. Presumably, complex socioeconomic inputs compounded the problem. These are traditionally reflected in declining maintenance, deterioration, and partial abandonment of marginal cropland, shifts to destructive pastoral exploitation, and eventual wholesale and irreversible land degradation. So they ruined the land. Once they couldn't get their food from abroad, they overused their land, and it ruined the empire. This syndrome was possibly accelerated by an apparent decline in rainfall between 730 and 760 AD, with the presumed result that an abbreviated modern growing season was re-established during the 9th century. So, what do you think? What about Aksum's position geographically in Africa made it an ideal place to run a trade empire? And what caused Aksum to collapse?